The interrogation chamber smelled of recycled air and something vaguely metallic that Krixtal couldn't quite identify. He sat across from the human female, his three-fingered hands clasped together on the smooth surface of the table, trying to maintain what his training had called neutral diplomatic posture. The human looked relaxed, too relaxed. Her boots were propped up on the chair next to her, and she was cleaning under her fingernails with what appeared to be a combat knife. A combat knife in an interrogation room on a galactic council station. Krixtal decided to ignore that for now. So he began consulting his data pad with two of his 4 eyes while keeping the other 2 fixed on her. Lieutenant Vera Kovac, Human Marine Corps, assigned to the RSS Nightfall for approximately 14 standard months. Is this information correct? The human Vera glanced up from her knife work. Her eyes were an unsettling shade of green, like the toxic algae blooms on Krixtal's home world. Yep, that's me. Though technically it's been 14 months. 3 weeks and about. She paused, squinting at nothing in particular. 6 days. Give or take. Precision is admirable, Krixtal said. Making a note, now I need to ask you some questions regarding the incident on Holdfast Station. There are concerns about human military conduct during the Scraith incursion. Concerns, Vera repeated, her mouth quirking into something that might have been a smile or a threat display. With humans, it was genuinely hard to tell. That's a fancy word for it. Krixtal's tail twitched, an involuntary sign of irritation. He pressed on. According to preliminary reports, there were significant casualties among the Scraith Assault Force. The Council requires a detailed accounting of combat actions taken by all involved parties. For the record, can you provide your personal kill count from the engagement? Vera stopped cleaning her nails. She looked up at him, and for a moment Krixtal felt something cold slither down his spine. It wasn't fear exactly, more like the sudden awareness that he was in a room with an apex predator, and he just said something very, very stupid. Then she tilted her head to one side, like a curious Earth canine. This year or just this planet? The question hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Krixtal blinked all 4 eyes in rapid succession. Excuse me. You asked for my kill count, Vera said, her tone conversational, almost friendly. I'm asking for clarification. Do you want the numbers from this year, starting from standard January 1st, or are we talking specifically about Holdfast Station? Because those are 2 very different figures, and I like to be accurate when someone's taking notes. Krixtal felt his mandibles go slack. In his 17 years as a council investigator, he'd interviewed soldiers from 6 different species. He'd documented war, crimes, acts of heroism, strategic disasters, and miraculous victories. Never, not once, had anyone responded to that question with a request for temporal clarification. He started, then stopped. His translator implant hummed in his skull, confirming that yes, he'd heard correctly. The incident on Holdfast Station. Specifically. Gotcha. Vera set down her knife finally and leaned back in her chair. It creaked under her weight. Humans were absurdly dense for their size, all compact muscle and thick bones. Evolution on a high-gravity death world. The xenobiologist said. Krixtal Believed them. Holdfast was. Let me think. Scraith came through the docking bay at 400, right? Yeah. So confirmed kills at Holdfast Station. She paused, her eyes going distant. 83. The number hit Crick's towel like a physical blow. 83 Scraith warriors in a single engagement. Well, 83 confirmed, Vera corrected. She picked up her knife again, examining the blade. There were probably another dozen or so in the cargo bay when we vented it to space, but I didn't personally verify those bodies, so I don't count them. Professional integrity and all that. Crick's data pad slipped from his fingers and clattered onto the table. He scrambled to pick it up, his hands suddenly clumsy. You. The cargo bay incident. That was you. Me and Corporal Davies, Vera said. Though Davies was mostly on overwatch. I handled the manual override for the bay doors. That action killed 17 Scraith. Preliminary reports suggested it was a systems malfunction. Vera's smile was sharp enough to cut steel. Did it, huh? Funny how these things happen. Crick's made a note with shaking hands. Or tried to. He had to delete and retype the same sentence 3 times. Let me make sure I understand. You personally eliminated 83 hostile combatants during an engagement that lasted, according to station logs, approximately 2 hours and 16 minutes. Sounds about right. That's. Crick's did the math in his head, then checked it on his data pad, then checked it again because surely he'd made an error. That's more than 1 kill every 2 minutes. Yeah, well. Vera shrugged, a peculiarly human gesture that involved lifting both shoulders. They kept coming. What was I supposed to do? Ask them politely to stop. And you said that was just this planet, Crick's said, his voice climbing higher than was probably professional. What exactly did you mean by that? Vera's expression shifted, the casual friendliness evaporated, replaced by something harder, colder. When she spoke, her voice was quiet, and somehow that made it worse. I meant that Holdfast was one station, on one planet, in one system during 1 year. I've been in the Corps for 6 years. Investigator, 6 years of deployments, patrols, skirmishes, and full-scale combat operations. Before I was on the Nightfall, I was on the Valiant Storm. Before that, the Iron Resolve. I've seen action on 11 different worlds, fought 4 different hostile species, and participated in more boarding actions than I can count on both hands. She leaned forward, and Crick's had to resist the urge to lean back. So when you ask me for a kill count, I need you to be specific, because the number from Holdfast Station, that's a Tuesday for me, that's a quiet shift, that's barely worth mentioning in a log report. Crick's swallowed, his throat was suddenly very dry. Then, what would be worth mentioning? Vera considered this. Rigel 7. That was worth mentioning. The Scraith had taken a colony settlement, about 4,000 civilians. We dropped in with a platoon, 32 Marines total. By the time we extracted the colonists and held the evacuation point, we were down to 19. I personally ran through 8 full magazines, 2 spare rifles after mine jammed, and a vibroblade I took off a dead Scraith commander. How many did you? 96 confirmed. Maybe 120 if you count the ones who might have died from wounds. After we pulled out, she said it like she was reporting the weather. Partly cloudy with a chance of mass casualties. That one earned me a commendation and a week in medical, but that's beside the point. Krixtal was no longer taking notes. He was just staring. You've been trained to be this effective in combat. It wasn't really a question, but Vera answered anyway. Trained, yeah, but training only gets you so far. The rest is experience, adaptability, willingness to do what needs doing when things go sideways. She tapped her knife against the table. A rhythmic clink, clink, clink that set Krixtal's nerves on edge. And things always go sideways. The council's concern, Krixtal said, trying to regain some semblance of control over this interview, is that human military forces may be employing excessive violence. There are species representatives who believe that humanity's approach to combat is disproportionate. Vera laughed, actually laughed, a short bark of sound that made Krixtal jump. Disproportionate. Right. Tell me, investigator, how many council species have mandatory military service? I don't see how that's relevant. Humor me. Krixtal consulted his general knowledge. 3. The Brexan hierarchy, the Kaelin Dominion, and the Tresk Confederacy. And how many council species have fought wars, real wars, in the last 100 years? That would be also 3. The same 3, in fact. Exactly. Vera pointed her knife at him, not threateningly, just emphasizing her point. Most of the council species developed faster than light travel during peaceful periods. They reached the stars holding hands and singing songs, or however you people do it. Humans. She shook her head. We invented our first space rockets to deliver bombs to our enemies. We built our first orbital stations while we were still pointing nuclear weapons at each other. We reached our moon during the same century. We fought 2 wars that killed millions. This is known, Krixtal said stiffly. Human history is concerning to many council members. I bet it is, Vera agreed, because it means we learned to fight before we learned to fly. We perfected violence before we ever left our atmosphere. And yeah, maybe that makes us scary. Maybe that makes us dangerous. But you know what? When the Skroth came boiling out of the outer reaches, when they started hitting colony worlds and stations, when they started killing civilians and taking territory, it wasn't the peaceful council species that stopped them. It was us. The violent, disproportionate humans. Krixtal had no response to that. Mostly because she was absolutely right. Holdfast Station had a garrison of 46 council security personnel. Vera continued, good soldiers, well trained by council standards. When the Skroth breached the docking bay, you know how many of those 46 were still combat effective after the first 10 minutes? 11. The rest were either dead, wounded, or had fallen back to secondary positions. And that's fine, that's what they were trained to do. Establish defensive perimeters, hold choke points, wait for reinforcements. And humans don't do that. Oh, we do all that. But we also do the other thing. Vera's smile was back, and it was absolutely predatory. We go on the offensive, we push forward. We hunt. The way she said that last word made Krixtal's skin prickle under his. Scales. There were 8 Marines on Holdfast. Station, Vera said, 8 of us. Including me. When the Scroth breached, we didn't fall back. We didn't wait for backup. We ran toward the enemy. Through the enemy. We turned that docking bay into a killing floor, and we didn't stop until every single Scroth was either dead or running. That seems incredibly risky. It absolutely was, Vera agreed. Cheerfully. Davies took a plasma burn to the shoulder. Martinez got clipped by shrapnel. I personally had 3 near misses with Scroth blade arms, and one of them got close enough to cut my combat vest, but we're all still alive. And the 4,000 civilians on Holdfast Station are still alive, and the station is still operational. So yeah, risky but effective. Krixtal managed to reactivate his data pad and start taking notes again, though his hands were still shaking slightly. The Council will want recommendations, ways to potentially integrate human combat doctrines into standard security forces. Good luck with that, Vera said. Snorting, you can't train someone to be human. Investigator, you can't teach a species to be aggressive if they've spent 10,000 years of evolution avoiding confrontation. It's not about tactics or weapons or strategies, it's about mindset. Explain. Vera was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts. When she spoke, her voice was serious, almost gentle. Most species run from danger. That's smart, that's survival. Humans, we run toward it, not because we're brave necessarily, though we can be. We run toward danger because somewhere in our monkey brains there's this little voice that says, but what if we can stop it? We see a threat, and instead of calculating escape routes, we start calculating attack vectors. It's stupid. It's probably a genetic defect left over from our days hunting megafauna on the African plains, but it's who we are. That's insane. Yeah, Vera agreed, grinning. It really is, but it wins fights. Krixtal made more notes, his mind racing. This interview was going to require a much longer report than he'd anticipated. Let me ask you something else. The kill count you mentioned, 83 at Holdfast, 96 at Rigel 7. Do those numbers bother you at all? Vera's expression shifted again, becoming something Krixtal couldn't quite read. You're asking if I feel guilty. I suppose I am. She considered this for a long moment, her green eyes distant. Every single one of those kills was a Scroth warrior who was actively trying to murder civilians or my fellow Marines. Every single one. I didn't kill anyone who surrendered. I didn't shoot anyone who was running away. I followed the rules of engagement, and I did my job. She met his gaze directly, unflinching. So no, I don't feel guilty. I feel tired, I feel sore, I feel like I need a shower and about 12 hours of sleep, but guilty? Not even a little bit. That's very honest of you. You asked. Krixtal saved his notes and set down his data pad. I think that's enough for today. I'll need to compile this information and present it to the Council Subcommittee. There will likely be follow-up questions. I'll be here, Vera said, standing up and stretching. Several of her joints made popping sounds that made Krixtal wince. Well, not here exactly. On the station. Probably in the Marine barracks. Or the mess hall. Definitely not causing any trouble. The way she said that last part made Krixtal absolutely certain she would be causing trouble. As she headed for the door, Krixtal found himself asking, "Lieutenant Kovacs, one more question, if you don't mind." She paused, turning back. "Shoot. You said 83 confirmed kills at Holdfast Station. What's your total? The actual number across all deployments, all engagements. Do you even know?" Vera was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft, almost contemplative. "Honestly, I stopped counting after the first year. Once you hit triple digits, the individual numbers stop meaning much. They all blur together into just the job, the mission, the reason we're out here." "And what reason is that?" She smiled, but this time it wasn't predatory or aggressive or threatening. It was almost sad. "Because someone has to be. Because if we don't stand between the monsters and the people who can't fight back, then who will? The council species are good people. Investigator. You're scientists, philosophers, artists, builders. You create beautiful things. You shouldn't have to become killers to protect those things. So humans will do it instead. She agreed. "We're already good at it, might as well put it to use." She left, and Krixtal sat alone in the interrogation room for a long time, staring at his notes. Tomorrow he would have to present his findings to the council. He would have to explain that humanity's effectiveness in combat wasn't the result of superior weapons or tactics, but something far more fundamental, something bred into them over millions of years of evolution, honed by centuries of warfare and unleashed now on a galaxy that wasn't prepared for it. He thought about Vera's question. This year or just this planet? He thought about the implications, and he wondered, not for the first time, if inviting humanity into the Galactic Council had been the wisest decision they'd ever made, or the most dangerous. Probably both. Definitely both. He started typing his report 3 days after his interview with Lieutenant Kovacs. Krixtal found himself in a conference room that was significantly more uncomfortable than the interrogation chamber had been. The council subcommittee consisted of 7 representatives from different species, all of whom had read his preliminary report and none of whom looked happy about it. Ambassador Telvorn, a tall Ythrian with silver skin and too many limbs, spoke. First, his voice came out as a melodic hum through his translator. "Investigator Krixtal, your report on the Holdfast Station incident raises more questions than it answers. You've documented extensive casualties among Scraith forces, but your analysis of human combat methodology is frankly alarming." "I documented what I observed," Krixtal said carefully. He'd prepared for this, sort of. The human marine demonstrated remarkable efficiency in combat situations. "Efficiency," repeated Counselor Brenna, Molluscan, whose speech came through as bubbling clicks. "You call the elimination of 83 sentient beings in 2 hours efficient. The Scraith were actively engaged in hostilities," Krixtal pointed out. "They had already killed 19 station personnel and were advancing on civilian shelters. The human response, while aggressive, prevented what would have been a massacre." "We're not questioning the outcome," said Representative Quar, a squat Corlaxian with 4 eyes like Krixtal's own species. "We're questioning the methods and more Specifically, we're questioning whether humanity's integration into council military operations is creating a dangerous precedent. Krixtal had expected this angle. Dangerous how specifically? They're too good at killing. Telvorn said bluntly. Your report indicates that this Lieutenant Kovacs has personally eliminated hundreds of hostiles across multiple engagements. Hundreds. Most council soldiers never fire their weapons in anger during their entire careers. This human has turned warfare into a routine activity. Because she's been at war, Krixtal said. The Scraith incursions have been ongoing for 3 years. Human forces have borne the primary combat burden during that time. By choice, Brenna interjected. They volunteered for frontline assignments. They requested the most dangerous postings. One might almost think they enjoy it. Krixtal thought about Vera's tired eyes, the way she described feeling exhausted and sore. I don't think enjoyment is the correct term. Then what is? Quar demanded. Before Krixtal could formulate an answer, the conference room door opened. A human walked in and every council member went very still. Humans had that effect. They moved with a predatory grace that set off instinctive alarm bells in species that had evolved as prey. This particular human was older than Kovacs, probably in his 50s by Earth reckoning, with gray hair cut military, short, and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. His uniform marked him as a colonel, and he carried himself with the kind of confidence that came from decades of command. Colonel James Reeves, the human said, nodding to the assembled council members. I apologize for the interruption, but I was informed this committee was discussing human military conduct. I thought a command perspective might be useful. Telvorn's skin shifted to a paler silver, which Krixtal recognized as a sign of agitation. This is highly irregular. So is putting one of my Marines through an interrogation without proper liaison. Notification, Reeves said pleasantly. His smile didn't reach his eyes. But I'm willing to overlook that if we can have a productive conversation. There was a long pause. Finally, Quar gestured to an empty seat. Very well. Perhaps you can help us understand something, Colonel. Why are human forces so exceptionally violent? Reeves sat down, taking his time, getting comfortable. Krixtal recognized the technique. The human was establishing that he wouldn't be rushed or intimidated. We're not violent, counselor. We're effective. There's a difference. Lieutenant Kovacs eliminated 83 hostiles in a single engagement. I'm aware. I recommended her for a commendation. You reward this behavior. I reward successful mission completion and the protection of civilian lives, Reeves said. His tone remained pleasant, but there was steel underneath. Kovacs and her team saved 4,000 people. That's worth rewarding. Brenna's translator bubbled rapidly. But the methodology, Colonel. The sheer aggression of the response. Your Marines didn't establish defensive positions. They attacked. They pursued. They hunted. Yes, Reeves agreed. They did. That's not standard council military doctrine. Council military doctrine is designed for council species, Reeves said. With respect, most of you developed your military traditions around concepts like honor, restraint, and minimal necessary force. Those are admirable values. They work well when everyone involved shares them, and the Scraith don't, Crixtal said. Quietly, Reeves pointed at him. Exactly. The Scraith are a warrior culture. They respect strength, they understand aggression, and they absolutely will exploit hesitation if you establish a defensive perimeter. And wait, they'll probe it, test it, and eventually break through. We've seen it happen on 6 different stations before Holdfast. So your solution is overwhelming? Violence, Telvorn asked. My solution is overwhelming commitment, Reeves corrected. When we engage completely. We don't fight to establish a stalemate or force a negotiation. We fight to win decisively, in a way that makes the enemy think twice before attacking again. Quar leaned forward, his multiple eyes narrowing. Some might call that brutality. Some might, Reeves acknowledged. But brutality implies unnecessary cruelty. We don't torture prisoners. We don't execute civilians. We don't engage in collective punishment. What we do is end threats quickly and completely. If that seems brutal, well, I'd argue that allowing conflicts to drag on for months or years, accumulating casualties on both sides, is actually more brutal in the long run. Crixtal found himself nodding before he caught himself. The human's logic was sound, even if it made him uncomfortable. Let me ask you all something, Reeves continued. Before humanity joined the Council's military efforts, how long had the Scraith conflict been going on? Silence. 6 years, Brenna finally admitted. Border skirmishes and raids for 6 years. And how many stations had been lost? 14, Quar said quietly. 14 stations. How many are you down since we got involved? None, Telvorn said. His silver skin had gone almost white. 0 confirmed losses in 3 years. Right. Reeves let that sink in. I'm not saying our way is the only way. I'm saying our way works against this particular enemy. The Scraith understand strength. When they hit Holdfast Station, they expected the same response they'd gotten before. Defensive positions, orderly retreat, eventual evacuation. Instead, they got 8 humans who charged them with rifles and bad attitudes. You know what the Scraith call us now? Nobody answered. Deathbringers, Reeves said. In their language, it translates roughly to the ones who end things. And you know what? I'll take that. Because since word got out about what happened at Holdfast, Scraith attacks on Council stations have dropped by 70%. They're not stupid. They learn from experience. So you're suggesting we adopt human combat doctrine across all Council forces? Quar asked. Absolutely not, Reeves said, surprising. Everyone. What works for us won't work for you. You can't train a Ythrian to fight like a human any more than you can train a human to photosynthesize. We're different species with different capabilities, different psychologies, different evolutionary backgrounds. Then what are you suggesting? Telvorn demanded. I'm suggesting you let us do what we're good at, Reeves said simply. When you need diplomats, use diplomats. When you need scientists, use scientists. When you need artists, philosophers, or engineers, use your people who excel at those things. But when you need someone to stand between civilians and a hostile force that only understands violence, he leaned back in his chair. Use humans. We've been preparing for that job since. We climbed down from the trees. Al raised one hand hesitantly. Colonel, may I ask a question? Go ahead. Lieutenant Kovacs told me something. During our interview, she said humans run toward danger, instead of away from it. That you see threats and calculate. Attack vectors instead of escape routes. Is that accurate? Reeves smiled, and this time it reached his eyes. That's pretty accurate, yeah. It's probably some kind of species-wide death wish, honestly. But it makes us good at what we do. Doesn't it bother you? Brinska asked. The killing, the violence, the constant combat. The smile faded from Reeves's face. When he spoke, his voice was quieter, more serious. Every single day. I've been in the Corps for 32 years, and I've never met a Marine who wasn't bothered by it on some level. We're not monsters, we don't enjoy death, but we've accepted something that I think most council species haven't had to accept, which is, Krikstal prompted, that sometimes violence is the answer. Not the first answer, not the preferred answer, but sometimes it's the only answer that works. The Escarith weren't going to leave Holdfast Station because we asked nicely. They weren't going to stop killing civilians because we appealed to their better nature. They were going to keep attacking until someone stopped them permanently. And humans are willing to do that. Telvorn said. Humans are willing to do that, Reeves confirmed. Because we understand something fundamental about the universe. Peace doesn't happen by accident. Peace happens because someone is willing to fight for it, to defend it, to get between the peaceful people and the ones who would harm them. We're not better than you. We're just specialized differently. Quar made a chittering sound that the translator rendered as a sigh. This committee was convened to determine whether human military conduct should be restricted or regulated more heavily. And Reeves asked, and I think we may have been asking the wrong question, Quar admitted. He looked at his fellow council members. The real question isn't whether humans are too violent, it's whether we've been too reluctant to embrace necessary force when protecting our citizens. That's dangerously close to endorsing militarism, Telvorn warned. No, Krikstal said, speaking up before he could stop himself. Everyone turned to look at him. It's endorsing reality. The investigator Reeves is correct. We've lost 0 stations since human integration into our military forces. Our civilian casualties have dropped by 84%. Those are facts, not opinions. Facts that come with a cost, Brinska said softly. How many Escarith have died in that same period? Thousands, Reeves said bluntly. Maybe tens of thousands. And before you ask, yes, that weighs on us. Yes, my Marines have nightmares. Yes. Some of them struggle with what they've done. But you know what else? 4,000 civilians went home to their families after Holdfast Station. The colony on Rigel 7 is still standing. The mining outpost at Keller's Rock didn't get turned into a graveyard. Those are real people living real lives. Because humans were willing to do the hard thing. The room fell silent. Al could see the council members processing this, struggling with the cognitive dissonance of needing violence, while being philosophically opposed to it. Finally, Quar spoke. Colonel Reeves, what would you recommend, not for council forces but for our ongoing cooperation with human Military units. Reeves considered carefully. Give us clear rules of engagement. Tell us what's acceptable and what isn't. We'll follow those rules to the letter. But within those rules, let us do our job. Don't second-guess every decision. Don't interrogate every casualty report. And for the love of whatever gods you believe in, don't ask us to fight with one hand tied behind our backs. And if council members feel your methods are too extreme, then have that discussion with command, not with individual Marines. Kovacs didn't design human military doctrine. She just executes it. If you have problems with how we operate, talk to people like me. We can adjust, adapt, find compromises. But don't make a combat Marine justify her survival instincts in an interrogation room. Al felt his face flush slightly. Point taken. Talvorn stood, his many limbs unfolding gracefully. I believe this committee has sufficient information to make a recommendation. Colonel Reeves, thank you for your candor. Investigator Crickstal, your report will be noted in the official record. We will adjourn for now and reconvene in 2 days to formulate our response. As the council members filed out, Crickstal found himself walking alongside Colonel Reeves. The human glanced down at him. Up close, Crickstal could see the lines around his eyes, the gray in his hair, the small scars on his hands. This was someone who had lived the life he was describing. That was well handled, Crickstal said quietly. Thanks, sorry if I put you on the spot. They're at the end. No, you were right. I shouldn't have interrogated Lieutenant Kovacs the way I did. I treated her like a suspect instead of a soldier doing her duty. Reeves shrugged. You were doing your job too. No hard feelings. They walked in silence for a moment. Then Crickstal asked, Colonel, can I ask you something off the record? Sure. That question Lieutenant Kovacs asked me about whether I wanted her kill count from this year or just from Holdfast Station. Did you know she would say that? Reeves laughed, a genuine sound of amusement. Oh, I absolutely knew she would say something like that. Kovacs has a gift for making people uncomfortable with simple honesty. It's one of her better qualities. It certainly made an impression. That was the point, Reeves said. You were treating her like an anomaly. Like her combat effectiveness was some kind of aberration. She wanted you to understand that she's not unusual. Not for a human Marine, she's just good at her job. A job that involves killing. Sometimes, yeah. Reeves stopped walking and turned to face Crickstal directly. Look, I know this is hard for Council species to understand. You've built entire civilizations on principles of peace, cooperation, mutual benefit. Those are good things, noble things. But the universe doesn't care about nobility. Sometimes the universe sends you Escarith, warriors who want to murder your civilians and take your territory. When that happens, you need people who can respond in kind. You need humans. And that doesn't bother you at all. Reeves was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft, almost sad. It bothers me constantly. I've signed off on operations that got people killed. I've sent Marines into situations I knew some of them wouldn't come back from. I've made decisions that haunt me in the small hours of the morning. But you know what would bother me more? Knowing I had the ability to protect innocent people and chose not to use it. that I let civilians die because I was too squeamish to do what was necessary. Griggs, I'm beginning to understand. Good. Reeves clapped him on the shoulder, nearly knocking him sideways. Humans were absurdly strong. For what it's worth, your report was fair. You documented what happened without editorializing too much. That takes integrity. Thank you, Colonel. Reeves walked away and Crickstow stood alone in the corridor thinking. 2 days later, the Council Subcommittee issued their recommendation. Human military forces would continue operating under current protocols with regular liaison meetings to ensure continued cooperation. The interrogation of individual soldiers regarding combat actions would cease unless there was specific evidence of rules of engagement violations. In essence, the Council had decided to trust humanity's judgment in military matters. Crickstow filed his final report and moved on to other cases. But sometimes, late at night in his quarters, he would think about Lieutenant Vera Kovacs and her simple question, this year or just this planet? He thought about the implications of a species so accustomed to violence that they had to clarify time frames when discussing casualties. He thought about Colonel Reeves and his quiet admission that the job bothered him constantly. He thought about the fundamental difference between species that had reached the stars through peace and a species that had weaponized space travel from the beginning. And he thought about the 4,000 civilians on Holdfast Station who were alive because 8 humans had run toward danger instead of away from it. Maybe, he concluded, the galaxy needed both kinds of species, the ones who built beautiful things and the ones who protected those beautiful things from the dark, the philosophers and the warriors, the dreamers and the fighters. It wasn't a comfortable thought. But then again, the truth rarely was. 6 months later, Crickstow received a message. It was from Lieutenant Kovacs, brief and to the point. Thought you want to know we just finished up on Terran Station, it read. Escareth Assault Force tried to breach the civilian sectors, we stopped them. 0 civilian casualties, 18 Marines wounded, none critical. My count for this deployment is 41. Confirmed. Figured you'd appreciate the precision. Below that she'd added, thanks for the fair report, by the way. Word got around that you didn't try to make us look like monsters. That meant something to the squad. Crickstow read the message 3 times, then carefully filed it away. 41 more. Just another Tuesday for human Marine. He found himself hoping, not for the first time and certainly not for the last, that humanity never decided the Council itself was a threat. Because if these death-bringers ever turned their focus inward toward the species they currently protected, the galaxy would have a very serious problem. But they wouldn't. He believed that now. Humans ran toward danger to stop it, not to cause it. They fought to protect, not to conquer. They were violent, yes, but that violence was directed outward, toward threats, toward enemies, toward the things that would harm the innocent. And sometimes Crickstow reflected that kind of violence was exactly what the galaxy needed.